How do I select the intended outcomes, outputs, and measures in a grant application? When it comes to securing grant funding, understanding the difference between these things, we're talking about here outcomes, outputs, and measures, it's very critical, but it's also important to understand how they integrate within your program team. Funders want to see a clear connection between the activities and its intended impact. If these things seem dissimilar, you've got red flags all over your application. I'm going to walk you through in this video 3 things to consider on this topic: outcomes, outputs, and measures. I'm Benjamin Dean from grantgetting.com. I hope you enjoy this video and others like it on the channel. They are aimed at helping you get more grants. Check out the link in the description when you're done watching the video for 7 additional tips on this topic. All right, so right off the bat, outcomes and outputs. We've got another video on here that will more directly talk about the differences between them. But what we're talking about here is the selection of them. So your outcomes are going to be longer term changes. The key word is changes that you hope to see as a result of your project. This is essentially why you are doing this project. This is the difference, the delta, the change in knowledge, the change in behavior, and depending on your categorization of this, the change in circumstance, the change in environment, the change in the community that you're seeing. Funders want to know what will change as a result of your work, whether it's improved community health, increased literacy, reduced homelessness, things like this. When you define your outcomes, one of the keys is to keep them specific and to keep them realistic. Okay? Specific and realistic. Many times you will see in grant applications outcomes being way too big, way too downstream. They're very large scale impacts. We want to have a completely homeless free environment, and we can do it, right? So that might be a big, hairy, audacious goal, but then when you get into the details of the plan, there's no way that these things connect. There's a disconnect between the activities and this outcome that you're wanting to achieve, right? So as a side note, as a tangent, if you want to include these big ideas, you can include them. But the outcomes on the project is not the place to do them. The outcomes on the project are the things that you're going to have to track. Okay, if you want to have an organizational goal, if you want to have an organizational vision of a fully housed environment, that's amazing. And that is your lighthouse. That's your North Star. That's what you're going towards. But you don't put that in your outcomes section. Okay, that's a big mistake, and that'll be a red flag. Okay, another example would be like, instead of saying increased literacy, we want to increase literacy. We might say instead, to be more specific, we want to improve reading comprehension among 150 at-risk youth in this geographic area by 20% over the next 16 months, right? That's very specific. You can measure that. Okay, you've got a specific number of a specific group and a specific increase, a change in behavior that you want to see. Okay, so when you're selecting things, the key is to be relevant and specific. Okay, relevant and specific to what it is that you're doing. The added layer will be realistic. It can be relevant and specific, but it can be completely unrealistic. All right, so setting your outcomes and selecting your outcomes is not too dissimilar from thinking about SMART goals. Okay, but it is slightly different because in some ways you're going to be looking at more detailed and more immediate feedback needed within 10 months or 11 months before you actually produce your final report. Okay, so you need to think about that part. That's outcomes, very clear outcomes. Then when it comes to outputs, these are the counting numbers. These are the right now things. So where outcomes are more longer term, outputs are the immediate measurable actions and products that your project will produce. The services, the products, the interactions. They're the direct results of your work. It's like the number of workshops that you conduct, the number of meals that you serve, the number of people that you train. These always need to be quantifiable and directly linked to your outcomes. Okay? You need to pick outputs that if you increase the number of outputs, it is highly correlated in some logical way or some demonstrable way to an increase in your ability to achieve your outcomes. Your outputs need to tie to your outcomes. Okay? And this may seem simple, but it might not be so simple in what you're doing. You might have always just measured how many people come to your workshops. Here's how many people came in week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Well, it might turn out that the number of people that come to your workshops is not directly correlated to increased literacy rates. What actually matters is the number of repeat visitors you have workshop over workshop, right? So the number of repeat visitors, that's an output, right? That is something you can count. It is a slightly more sophisticated output than just number of people, but it's still an output. You're still counting. And you might be able to find data and you might be able to derive from your previous work that when someone attends 4 or more workshops, they have a 45% higher likelihood of going through this entire program, which then gives them a 25% increase in literacy or something like that. You might find that your output metric that you always tracked and just might seem like the obvious thing to track is not connected to your outcome at all. So this gets into number 3, relevant measures. Selecting the right measures is essential to demonstrate how you'll track your outputs and your outcomes. These measures will help you assess whether your project is achieving its goals or on pace to do so or not on pace. You can have a mix in this area of quantitative and qualitative measures, depending on the nature of your project. So quantitative measures would include or might include things like tracking the attendance, the test scores, the number of services delivered, the number of repeat services, while a qualitative measurement structure could be, your participant feedback, your surveys, your interviews, your anecdotal conversations that you're having, your volunteer satisfaction rate, these sort of things. You want to kind of do a broad look at measures, meaning that what is all the things that we can measure to know that we're on pace to hit our outputs and our outcomes. Okay, so you might find, for example, a measurement for success will be how much awareness there is in your community around these workshops. That might just be the main barrier. People have transportation. If they find out about it, they want to come. Your marketing's good, but it isn't reaching everyone because there's low awareness in your community about the services that you provide. So you want to achieve these outputs, ultimately to achieve these outcomes, then what is the key? What is a measurement that you need to have in place to make sure you're on pace to do these things? Well, you might have found out from 2 years of doing this that among all the marketing that you have going on, which might include flyers, it might include a mailer, it might include Facebook advertising, Google advertising, it might include organic social media, it might include partnerships, all these things that you're doing to let people know that you are here and this service is available. You might have found through surveys that there is one thing that works better than all of them combined, and that is a Facebook post. You might find that your Facebook posting is drawing in 90% of your new clients week over week. So that is a measurement. Social media engagement or Facebook posting and engagement on your Facebook posts is a measurement that you can track as a manager of a process to say, are we on pace to do this? So we know that Facebook posts work. And previously we did one every 2 weeks. We're going to move that to one every 3 days. We're going to put these posts up every 3 days. We're going to have somebody on there engaging, sending out messages. We know that this is the platform. We're going to start tracking those metrics. That's a measurement or something you could call a KPI that will lead towards, or you have evidence saying that it will lead towards success in this project. Okay, ultimately, you can also look at qualitative measures. You can say, you know what we found is when our volunteers are super engaged on site, when they're happy, when they feel like they're in the flow, that what they're doing is meaningful, we see that they have better interactions with our clients. And what that does is that increases retention rate, that increases return visits. So, return visits, we know that's an important factor that correlates to our outcome. So if we want return visits, we need to have happy volunteers. So what are the interventions that we can do to make sure we have happy volunteers? We know that they need water. We know that they like music. We know that they like to have a check-in beforehand with some of the program team to hear what else is going on in the organization. We know that those things increase a sense of belonging, and that increases their happiness. That's going to set them up for a better day of volunteering with our clients. So now what are we going to do? We're going to start tracking how many times we do those interventions, or if we do those interventions with our volunteers. We could also do a satisfaction survey with our volunteers once every few weeks over the course of this 12-month project to see, are we doing it? Are the volunteers feeling like they're a part of something that's very special? That's great, because we know that that's going to lead to the output, which is going to lead to the impact. Okay, so these are some of the measures. These are some of the things that you want to be thinking about, tying the measurements, tying the outputs to the outcomes. Okay, I hope that this is helpful. Check out the link in the description for 7 additional tips on this topic. And if you have questions about this, pop them in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and potentially help out. So thank you so much for jumping in, and we will see you in the next video.